Greetings, Internet! Welcome to episode number 104 of the Comic Watchers Show. I'm your host, Matt Meyer. With me, as always, is Nicholas Osborne. Mike Eakins was out sick this week. Mike, we hope you get to feeling better. We'll see you soon. But we've got Cody White jumping in. And our guest this week is creator, writer, all-around awesome human being, Greg Anderson Elysee, the creator of is Nana the Were-Spider, the Gentleman, and quite the up-and-comer. So, without further ado.
So quick, Elysee.
Sorry? I told you I was going to screw that up. I told you. Okay, you know what?
Do you want to stop and start over?
I told you guys
I was waiting. I was like, yes.
Elysee. Whoa. I wasn't even aware I said it wrong until you guys started laughing. God damn it. I'm sorry, Greg.
And that's a great way to run.
Yeah. There's a
we
whole
are live.
thing.
What a great way to run it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Welcome to episode 104, everybody.
Okay, so we're here. We've got our giggles out at my expense this week. Greg, welcome to our show. I promise you we're professionals. I know. Well, we try anyway. We're not professionally paid to do this yet, so I guess there's a certain amount of leniency there. But yeah, dude, thank you for coming on and talking with us. I guess my first question I always like to ask folks, because we're in such crazy times right now, is how are you? Are you safe? Is everyone in your life healthy?
Yeah, I guess we're the lucky ones. You know, I'm hearing a lot of horror stories. I know my pops and my stepmom, they've lost a couple of friends. I've had close friends who got really sick and were in the hospital, but they've been able to pull through. But no one like in my immediate family, at least that I'm aware of, has experienced anything. My partner had it in the very beginning of the craziness.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he pulled through, but it's cool. We're good.
That's good. That's good. So you on top of writing is Nana the Were-Spider and the Gentleman, you've got a really amazing just personal resume. Public educator, high school level, if I'm not mistaken.
All ages, most middle school, high school, and adults as well.
Wow, dude, that in and of itself deserves a round of applause. Public education, like, is just so undervalued and underfunded, and I mean, we ought to be paying our teachers, as much as we pay our doctors, in my opinion. So, I know you've also done some comics journalism in the past as well. And what brought you to the creative side of things?
I've always wanted to be a creator. I've been writing stories since the first grade. And when I discovered comics in the second grade, I was just like, whoa, this is so freaking cool. And I think the first time I've ever thought about doing anything comic related was when I was in middle school. I had a art teacher, because I used to draw all the time. That was my thing. Even up to high school, I went to a fine arts school, and that was the thing I was studying. But I had a middle school art teacher who would say, why don't you create your own characters? And from there, it was just like, oh, I can make my own characters. And that seemed to open up so many different avenues in my head. And it wasn't until I was in high school when I was reading a book from Peter David about how to write comic books. And once I read that book, once it finished, I was just like, yo, this is what I want to do.
This is it.
This is it.
The moment.
And so that, like, being into a lot of books and characters and wanting to see more characters of color and queer characters and stuff, I was just like, yo, if I ain't seeing what I want, I'm just going to make it myself.
That's awesome. And I mean, having read the first 2 volumes of Isnana. And I should plug right now, the 3rd volume is running on Kickstarter right now, correct?
Well, the thing is, volume 3 will be more so a collection of shorts.
Okay.
The Showtime, we actually ended already a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, okay, okay.
The Showtime, and we had one from last year, which was a one shot where he meets John Henry. If you're familiar with the John Henry legend,
Yes.
And so it's, and I have one more one shot I'm going to release hopefully next year. Those 3 together will be part of volume 3, along with some stories from anthologies and shorts that we haven't released yet for Isnana. And so it's a part of volume 3.
Okay, awesome. Like it's such a unique book. I think this doesn't really do it justice, but it's kind of got an American Gods type feel, but drawing from African religions and folklore. And I just found that to be such a breath of fresh air. Because I mean, I don't know much, if anything, about any of that stuff, and I can imagine I'm far from the only person reading comics that can make that claim. But you do it in a way that's really down to earth and just relatable. And could you tell us a little bit about the origins of this story?
Sure. So I grew up on Greek mythology. I was obsessed growing up, and European fairy tales as well. My mom used to introduce me to a lot of that, and she introduced me to the Clash of the Titans and all that other stuff. And it wasn't until I think I reached high school was when it's always the art teachers. I had an art teacher in high school who had a book, a giant book on mythology from various cultures. And the first place I went to, of course, was Greek mythology. That was just my go-to no matter what. And after a while, I started thinking, wait, I don't know any. Are there any mythologies based off of Haitian folklore or spirituality and so on? Because I didn't know any, and that's my background. And from there, I started seeing, oh, wait, we have gods ourselves. And I went asking my mom for information, and she was like, we're not talking about that, no. And yeah, because it's a lot of I guess you could say Haitian spirituality, and some people will say mythology. I don't want to disrespect the traditions, but essentially they have a bad reputation and representation because it's voodoo culture.
Mm-hmm.
And you can blame colonizers for that during the slave trade of messing up the spirituality and forcing people to believe and brainwashing people to believe that it's evil and devil worship, as well as Hollywood taking the reins and turning it into a source of horror for horror stories and horror movies. And so because of that, we all these generations to this day still believe that Haitian spirituality is something that should be taboo, not talked about, and suppressed. And when I asked my dad about it, he was just like, "Oh, I know a couple. I could tell you. I could tell you what you want to know." And so from there, I think that started me wanting to learn more about Black spirituality, Black legends, Black folklore, and so on, because it was like we're not educated, we're not required to be educated on it, but we're tested on Greek myths and European fairy tales all the time since we're kids. When we go to college, we have to take classical cultures
Yeah.
is European mythology again. And so, but if you want to learn anything about African or Black or African American, you have to take an elective. And so I wanted to sort of change that narrative when I started taking these elective classes and learning more about some, Black heroes and gods and stuff. And I would ask people if they knew who Anansi the Spider was, and I would get, who is that? And to me, Anansi is, out of almost all the Black gods, the most well-known god. And even before American gods, which luckily, now people are starting to know who he is, I would ask Black folks as well if they knew who Anansi the Spider, and unless they were told stories by their grandparents or their parents from the Caribbean or West Africa, they had no idea who he was. And he's also the god of stories. So that's where I came up with Isnana, to represent, his son, the next generation of reclaiming the roots, reclaiming the stories, and hopefully using that as like the theme of getting people interested in and curious about who some of these characters are that I'm introducing in the series.
Yeah, it's such. I mean, there's such a rich tapestry and just diversity of ideas and characters at play here. But at the center of it all, you have Isnana in a, for as a fish out of water, and learning about Earth and humanity, and he's got this very innocent but not naive viewpoint of the world, and I just think that's really refreshing. How did you go about developing his character?
I was inspired by a couple of different things. For one, there's a French animated film called Kirikou, which it's supposed to be based. It's like inspired by African folklore, and I remember just being so enamored with the way they portrayed the character. He was the character is literally a child who was just born. Like he crawls out of his mom's stomach, and he automatically he's going on adventures within like his birth, and he's just like very sweet, innocent character, and that was one of my inspirations, as well as Rurouni Kenshin, the anime. Like I despite the fact that the main character has a weird, like a messed up past, when you're watching it, he tries to be very polite. He's this sort of honest, almost pacifist type of character. And I feel like we don't quite see that. I feel like a lot of people want to make their characters be this badass. And I wanted a character who was actually very kind and sweet and innocent. And to the point where, despite the fact that he has to fight, he does not like to fight whatsoever.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
Yeah, and I thought it would be also a good contrast with Anansi, because when you read Anansi stories, not that he's very fight heavy, but he's always getting himself into trouble. He's a smart ass. He's a jerk, like all this other stuff. And I just thought it would be a fun contrast with all the other inspirations that I have of making the son be the total complete opposite.
Yeah, there's that great moment in Volume 2 where Isnana looks at his father. It's like, you realize this is your fault, right? It just cracked me up, and that spoke to me. And guys, I'm sorry, I'll let you jump in a second. I got a million ideas run through my head. There's humor and horror. God bless. In the second volume, when the bees are crawling inside of the father and Leonard, and that's a truly horrific moment, man. But it works within the context. Is that kind of a conscious decision on your part to, make sure that you've got enough variation in style to really give this thing wings and let it flesh itself out naturally?
Well, for one, horror is just my go-to. I love horror. That was another thing that my mom introduced me to. Despite the fact that she is a crazy conservative Christian, she was a big horror nut when I was growing up, and I got introduced to a lot of horror films. And that's just my favorite genre. I feel almost everything that I write ends up having some element of horror in it. And I think that's just one of the things that just comes very natural for me when I was writing. And it's not I think there's a lot of creepiness that I like to mess around with. And given that he's also a spider, and that's another thing, wanting to play around with the motif of, like, he's a spider. His true form is this terrifying thing, but he's actually very sweet and innocent.
Yeah.
And I like playing around with different genres as well. I mean, you guys have read a lot of my other stuff. It's very hard for me to just write like that's it. This is horror and that's all it's going to be. I just try to draw from a lot of things. I just allow my creativity and my mind to just flow with whatever feels natural, with the characters, with the story that's coming along. And I think I am also just a fan of humor, and humor is just very very strong within like the Black community. The way we joke and tease each other back and forth, and we turn everything into some type of a joke, and I think so. A lot of that just naturally comes with my work.
Awesome. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, super. I honestly just have to like fawn for a little bit. An anime reference drop I'm always on board for. So cool. Fan of horror, and comedy goes hand in hand with horror, so it feels natural. And you dig into Isnana Volume 1, and there's a forward by David Hine, and it jumps right off the bat with saying that you're a big Todd McFarlane Spawn fan. And hands down, I was just sold. I said, well, whatever's coming next, I'm going to be into it. I have no doubt. Just really cool. And I couldn't help but notice you picked up on sort of Hollywood's treatment of especially African folklore as a catalyst for horror. And it kind of demonizes it in a way, and it pushes people away. Was there something about you bringing that horror influence into Isnana that you felt maybe a little wary about, or that you had to handle it in a way that
I
you
think
hadn't
for
seen
me,
before?
it's more so of how I'm going to be treating the horror and the themes and the elements. For example, there has been a few horror films where they do showcase African spirituality or voodoo, but they're not the source of horror. And there's like one in particular, I can't remember the name of the film. It was supposed to be like a sequel to another film which I hadn't seen, but there was a character who's possessed, and you had some characters who knew voodoo who were trying to help her. And so it was just like one of the first times seeing, like these are good guys actually using the spirituality to help out the main character. um and there's a few other films here and there where you'll see that subversion. And so for me, despite the fact that I do go into horror and I do showcase some of the characters, but I try to showcase like they're not the source of the evil or the horror that's going on. I want to sort of change the narrative and showcase that there's a lot of cool things within our stories and our spiritualities that we see. We don't get somebody with the respect to actually show the diversity and the nuances that can come about, using this stuff. And so it has been something that I've thought about. I hope some people don't think, it's a horror book and he's using African spirituality like he's gonna be. But it's one of those things where it's like, read the book, see what I do with it before you make a criticism before, without knowing ahead of how I'm actually using the themes, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that helped, even in the volume 1, it says of all the sons, you're the pacifist. I think that kind of distinction helps to elevate the use of horror, and it injects a bit of comedy in, but it does set the context for a usage of especially African folklore and spirituality that you don't see all that often. It doesn't fall into tropes or anything like that.
Cody.
Yeah, so Greg and I have been friends for a couple of years on Facebook, like been following what goes on in his life. He follows what goes on in my life. It's been really cool. It's 2020. We're talking about horror, and the real horror is playing out in front of us, right? Like, I mean, it's been a hell of a year. So I'm the only person here that's read, other than Greg, that's read Showtime, which is the most recent Kickstarter. And Showtime deals with very real cultural subjects of police brutality, of just the absolute violence that is being perpetrated on the Black community. And I was hoping that we could get you to talk a little bit about Showtime. I'm a backer. I can't wait to get my copy. That was one of, I think, the most culturally relevant comics of this year. And I mean, I cannot push enough. Find a way to read this book. It was really fucking good. But I was hoping you could talk a little bit about, your own place as a Brooklyn citizen, right? Like, you grew up, born and raised in Brooklyn, you live in Brooklyn. What all the Black Lives Matter and all that plays into Showtime means.
Well, it's
currently
funny that you even say that too, because I actually wrote this script years ago. and that scene was there, and I developed. That was one of the scenes that I tried to be very careful with showcasing. And for the ones who don't know, in the book is Nana. It's like a little backstory. Is Nana is in fact a spider, and when he comes to this universe, he he looks like a black kid. He's a black kid essentially. And the other stories we haven't quite tackled on race, even though it's a book celebrating black culture and black stories. He's never dealt with anything to do with his skin color. And I felt, given that in the story he meets a group of kids who are kids of color, and they're hanging out in the streets, they're dancing in the streets, they're dancing on the trains, which a lot of people have tried to stop, and cops try to stop kids and give them tickets for dancing on the train, them not bothering anybody. And I, given that I'm also in education, I've had times where some of my students would come and they would be pissed off, and they talk about they were stopped by the cops just for coming to school, or they were stopped and frisked, or I would have students when we do projects. The one thing that they're pissed and stressed about, they want to talk about the situation that happened, where they got picked up, they got locked up, whatever it is, and it's very unfair. And I felt that it's Nana hanging out with these students, with these kids who were actually based off of students that I've had in the past. It only made sense for him to actually deal with some of the issues that they deal with on a regular. And I wanted him to, I wanted the readers, even the readers who are unfamiliar with it, to see from his point of view that he can be the sweetest person. All he did was dance, and all of a sudden he's on the ground, getting cuffed up, getting roughed up by these cops, and so on. And it's just unfortunately a reality, and it sucks that. And I've had people say, it resonates a lot with this year, and it was just like, don't you think it's weird that I actually wrote this years ago, but it's still something that's resonating to this day. And this has just been our reality, especially for Black youth, for Black people in general in America. This is our reality, and it just did not feel right to not find a way to put it into this particular story if he's hanging out with the youth, just being a kid, having fun. This is the reality, as I said.
It was such a powerful story. Like, and I was floored reading it. You're sitting here with three white dudes. Sorry, but it was one of those things that, like, you read it and you can't help but recognize the strength of this narrative. And I mean, I pushed it on as many people as I could. I'm glad it got funded. I can't wait. But I mean, it was remarkable, the restraint. Like, it was graceful in the way you approached it, but also like a blunt instrument to the heart.
Yeah, I was very curious to hear how people would feel reading that scene so far with the reviews and the early reviews, and it seemed that was definitely a thing that hit people. And there was one, I think his name is Joey Galvez, who does a podcast. He actually told me the scene actually made him emotional to read, because it brought right back to when that same thing happened to him. And it was one of those things where, even though you wanted to have an impact, I didn't really expect it to have as much impact as it did until I started hearing from some people. And it was just like, I'm sorry that it happened to you. And, and I hope that this helps, people feel a particular way. And if it disgusts people to read, then that's the point. That's what we deal with.
Do you feel as a excuse me, I guess I'm getting laryngitis now. As a Black creator, do you feel any sort of added responsibility to tell these stories, or is this something more from a personal level, if that makes sense?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything, honestly. I feel just like when we're told as writers to write what we know.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that I know. This is the stuff that I researched and I read upon, and I just felt it's something naturally to write about, as well as it does feel a bit of a responsibility. If I have the platform, if I have the skills, why not address it? Why not do something about it to try to make the world a better place? And it also goes back to representation. As it's not often that you see marginalized people as the main characters to the same ratio amount as we see white characters, and to the point where white people are just seen as default for some, you guys are the default when it comes to storytelling. And I feel like it is a bit of a responsibility, and it's not something like I don't feel it as a burden. I feel like this is exactly what I want to do, is what I need to do as well. And I always say, like, I come from the school of Toni Morrison, when when she was asked, who do you write for, who's your audience, and she said Black people. Because I've been wanting to see these stories since I was younger, and it doesn't make sense for me not to do it. And I know people want to see this stuff, and I'm totally cool with, if you're not Black, to read my stuff. If you're down, cool, join the party. But first and foremost, I write for marginalized people who are looking for this type of representation.
That that's beyond powerful to hear, and I just honestly thank you. We need more voices like yours that are conscious and cognizant and passionate about any marginalized people, because if their voices aren't heard, then we never move forward. And I swore I wasn't going to make this overly political, but I guess we're here. I feel like that right now the discourse or anti-discourse, I guess, might be a better term, that you're seeing right now playing out in politics with regards to race and representation and everybody having a seat at the table is it's hit a boiling point right now. And I feel like if you take a historical perspective, we probably, and at least in this country, haven't been at a point like this since maybe 1968 or thereabouts. And like, it's a scary time out there, but I also feel that times of strife create great art. And I mean, what do you have any thoughts on that?
I definitely feel that as well, when it comes to, because I mean, it comes to a point people need to vent, people need to express their pain, whatever it is that they're going through, and it's also a little bit cathartic for people to read it, to who are experiencing those same things, but they don't know how to express it. And so when they see other people are also going through it, it feels like my feelings are being heard. My thoughts are being expressed. And it's unfortunate that we got to deal with all this stuff, anything to do with, I guess, bigotry. That's really what it is.
Absolutely.
It all goes down to bigotry, all forms of discrimination. And I don't know. I feel like I want there to be an easy fix. And I feel like every time we feel like there might be some type of strife, you just see just how many people or in reality actually feel like this is the way to go, of being an asshole or a douchebag to other people who or people who support it. And I made a post yesterday, waking up to seeing that 64 million people who had voted for Trump, and it's just like, think of every damn thing this dude represents that he has done in just 4 years. And you got over 64 million believe that, yes, this is right. and it just is like, and it makes me think how many people on my page supported this, that because my timeline does not reflect a lot of Republicans that I be seeing on my page. So I'm just like, I know there's a lot of you guys are very silent right now. Which one are you? Just remove yourself from my vicinity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I guess to dig in a little bit more into the controversial nature of how content seems to be now, I have to bring up The Gentleman, because it's pretty immediately described as a Lovecraftian inspired story, and you get that vibe out of it. And it's not news to anybody, the history of Lovecraft himself. And we got that here recently with the HBO series Lovecraft Country, where they're handling that topic. And there's a line in the first episode where he says, you try to cherish their virtues and overlook their flaws, but the flaws are still there, and about how to handle that content. And I feel like, you have a certain willingness to handle those issues yourself, and what you bring in to both The Gentleman and even as Nana. And is there something to that weight of you taking an inspiration from something like Lovecraft and turning it into a story like The Gentleman that we can enjoy now?
So even before Gentleman, I tried to avoid Lovecraft.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
He was an abhorrent human being.
So that's the thing, because me being a fan of horror, it was bound to happen that I was going to stumble onto Lovecraft. And I remember reading a little bit of his work and going to a bookstore and just buying. I think I bought one or two of his books, and I was just like, "Yo, this guy is so freaking like amazing. I understand why people freak out about him, why he's the master, the grandfather." And I was into it. And when I finally stumbled onto that fucking poem, what was it, The Creation of Niggers or some shit like that, I was like, what the hell? And then doing more research on him and finding out that this dude was racist and xenophobic. And I think there's some accounts that he was also a homophobe as well. And it was just like, yo, fuck this dude. I didn't want to read a single piece, and to the point where even things that were inspired by Lovecraft is just like, get this shit out of my face. I don't want to see this thing at all. But when the creator of The Gentleman, Marcel Dupree, he contacted me. I guess he saw that people was reading his Nana, was into it, the horror thing, and he reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in checking out this character, doing something with it. And when I got all the notes and everything about the character, my mind went to thinking, oh God, this character is very Lovecraftian. And I don't know if it was intentional on Marcel's part. Yeah, I don't think it was intentional, but it just felt like a Lovecraftian type of character. And so I started looking for, I guess, Lovecraft inspired stories that subverted some of the stuff that he represented. And so that's when I actually learned about Lovecraft Country. Before the whole TV show, like I found out about the book, I read it, I went through that book so fast. I was addicted to it. And I read The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle as well. And so just to get into that sort of mindset of like, okay, there's Black stories out there that's using Lovecraft, or how exactly do they do that? Right. And I loved how David Hine did his Darkness run with Jeremy Hahn, which was very Lovecraftian as well. And so those were sort of like some inspirations of getting myself into that mentality, that mindset. And when I started developing more about the character and the story, I just thought, I'm gonna make this like a total fuck you to Lovecraft. Of he's a Black bisexual hero in a Lovecraft story, and I'm hoping if he hears about it that he turns over his grave a little bit. It's just like, oh, Negroes are in my stories. And so it's essentially, that's how I pretty much started looking at the story as I was writing it, and I'm proud of the stories so far. The 2 issues that came out, I think I think it's dope. I'm a fan of it, but it's definitely, I don't know. I'm just not. It's not something that I feel like I want to tackle again when it comes to anything inspired by Lovecraft.
Right.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And honestly, I did get the fuck you nature to Lovecraft. I mean, even out of just issue 1, because it's just kind of, it drops one after another, and you're like, okay, I'm picking up on what's going on here. And it's kind of a delicate thing, but it's something that you don't get to talk about often either. And I feel like Lovecraft Country, the TV show, kind of helped spur that discussion on a little. But these are the books and stories that I feel like kind of take that power back a little bit and change it into something that's a little bit more accessible for 2020, what we should be living in, counting out the 64 million plus votes that we're dealing with here. But I think that's an almost weaponized version of Lovecraft. And I love that comes through so powerful in the storytelling that you've done too. It's just top-notch stuff.
Thank you.
Cody, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to. I know there's so much more we could talk about with Lovecraft Country. That show was wild, and I know you've been watching it. I've been watching your posts, but I wanted to kind of bring it back to this. Like Matt kind of touched on this, our own voices, like hashtag our own voices, kind of thematic, and most of the people that work on the books that you work on are also creators of color, and I'm not necessarily Black creators, but creators of color, and many also LGBT creators as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the process of constructing that community and surrounding yourself and insulating yourself with like-minded people that are wanting to tell like-minded stories. Like it's a really great thing. I remember when you were looking for a Black letterer, and of course Darren Bennett comes up. Darren Bennett's one of my absolute favorites. So, I mean, Darren Bennett gets linked in, and he ends up doing the letters for Showtime. So I just wanted to kind of talk about like how that community forges and how all that comes together. Sorry about the voice.
No, you're good. I mean, I want to try to bring as many of us as I can to showcase our talents. I don't know. When I first came up with Isnana, the first thing I wanted a Black artist. I wanted a Black team. But it's a little weird finding people in the very beginning. So when I did get Walter, I feel like I did luck out in the sense of like, oh, thank God he's a creator of color. Even though that wasn't intentional when I hired him, but when I found out, I was like, oh, sweet, okay, cool. But I feel there's a lot of talent out there that a lot of people aren't aware of, and I feel like if I have the platform to really showcase a lot of us, I should be doing that. And there's a lot who just not quite getting a lot of the opportunity. They're not being looked at as much. And so I felt, dude, just come, let's do work together. And it's given that I try to do a little for us by us type of thing with Isnana. Like I wanted to, and a lot of my work in general, it's sort of let's use our voice, let's use our power to make these books that we've been wanting to see forever. I try my best. I started off as Nana being a lot more diverse when it comes to creators, and even when Daryl Toe came, him being from Asia and kicking ass on the book as well. It's just gradually turning more into a black creative team just to showcase a lot of just the variety that we have. And there's so much. I feel like a lot of people have this sort of mentality of what is a Black book and what is a Black artist, or they don't know any. And I just want to showcase, like, I want this to be a showcase of just Black talent, in general. And also I've even lucked out, honestly, with LGBT creators. There's so many out there to the point where we're vibing and then we're creating, and then I found out, wait, you're queer? And I'm just like, yo, this is awesome, and even Showtime, we have some queer folks that was just working on the book, and it wasn't intentional, but it felt right, you know. And it's just like we have our voices that we can express ourselves, and we're seen as like this so really marginalized, not talked about crew types of people, but we can make extremely powerful work. And to the point where people, they see the work and they don't really think about, oh, who is these creators? It's just like, well, some black queer folks who's giving you some dopeness right here, you know. But I try my best to work with, I try to work with all types of people, but it for the most part, people of color or LGBTQ is the ones that they become first priority for me. You know, I feel like that's the voice. Those are the talents I want to tackle and showcase more of.
Yeah. Well, I was really impressed with the array of talent that you brought to the second story in volume in It's Not a Volume 2, where Papa Legba and Anansi are watching TV together. Like just the totally different art styles and just the fun, the obvious fun that's being had by everybody involved, getting to come to the table and sit down. And as the creator of this world, and these iterations of these characters anyway, does it make you a little nervous, like handing your babies over to people and saying, you know, take care of them?
Well, I think with that particular story, you're talking about the little crossover we had at the end, right?
Yes.
That
So
was
awesome. I really felt like you turned a corner, and it was already a really awesome street you were on, and then you turned a corner onto like a fucking 8-lane highway, and just opened up all of these new storytelling possibilities for what this world can look like. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, a lot of it goes down to, I think me doing that, there was so many different things I wanted to do. For example, I want as you guys already know, with Isnana, almost every story has a different artist, has a different creative team that I'm playing with. And I'm always interested in seeing how different styles depict the character.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a way for me to do that, as well as showcase a lot of independent books that a lot of people may not be aware of. And before I even started doing comics, I was doing a lot of interviews, journalism. I was meeting a lot of creators. My whole thing, I wanted to, for the longest time, as much as I can, to showcase so many independent works and people of color and so on. And so given that was sort of decreasing just a little bit on that end, I wanted to use this as a platform to showcase there's some awesome creators out there with their own books. And so that was a way of me doing that while still keeping with the story that I'm trying to tell.
Yeah.
It just made sense to just make it seem like he's dimension hopping, you know, and trying to get some of my favorite creators, independent creators involved. And the majority of them were Black creators. And given that there's some people that would pick up the book and just think, oh, there's other Black books out there with Black characters. Hopefully, you know, that would get them interested in checking out the books, which is why in the back I gave information of how to find those other works out there. Yeah, so yeah, a lot of it just comes down to me trying to support and showcase other people while still going with the themes of what I'm trying to do with this Nana and to keep the story progressing and just having a lot of fun. I feel like comics are not always as fun as they should be, you know, and I guess a little bit like how Alan Moore feels. He wants to make comics to be unfilmable, even though now that's impossible. And just showcase like what we can do with comics. Like this is some fun stuff that we can do.
Oh, it's funny you say that, because we had Tom Pyre that we were talking to last week from Ahoy, and he said the exact same thing about wanting comics to be fun. So it would seem that there's a growing consensus within the industry that's a direction that needs to be gone in general.
Well, it's funny because I say that too, but then I find a lot of depressing comics fun at the same time because
bro, you're dealing with some seriously heavy shit in your books. But they're such a joy to read.
I know, like what's you call it? Morrison and McKean's Arkham Asylum.
Yes.
That's just depressing and mind-numbing, but I have so much fun reading that damn book.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
So kind of
I think it's
along those
interesting.
lines, like since we're talking in that kind of ballpark, you're a purely indie creator at this point, but we're starting to see the major comic publishers delving more into this LGBT, this people of color crowd. Like we've got Vita is getting ready to do a book for Future State, right? Like non-binary. Afro,
And at
Puerto
some
Rican.
point, an X-Men comic that may come out.
Right, and she just did, or they just did, Marauders.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
you've got John Ridley is getting ready to do a Batman book with a black Batman. Like
And
so
the
much
other
exciting
history of the
stuff coming.
DCU.
If you were afforded the opportunity, what books would you be interested in the mainstream and or maybe not the mainstream, but like the kind of wider, larger publisher scene?
My first go-to will always be Dr. Voodoo.
Oh, yes!
If I can do a Brother Dr. Voodoo series, I would murder the hell out of that book. I have so much respect for the tradition.
There he is.
That's my book right there, you see?
Yeah.
Rick Remender did a great job with that one.
Yes.
Such a fun book, and the art is just spectacular. But yeah, that's a character that I've been interested in, which is funny because I remember when I first learned about the character, I was thinking, really? This is the Haitian superhero they give us? This is awful. Until I actually read the original stories from was it Strange Tales, or I can't remember where the original.
Yep. Strange Tales number 168, I believe, or no, 169, somewhere in there, 170 maybe.
Yeah, it was so much fun. I picked up on a lot of things that the creators did a lot of research on. There was some problematic stuff, but for the most part, there was some care within the research that you can tell if you're aware of some of the traditions and the context. And I started seeing so much potential for this character, and I just grew this love for this character and the potential that could be done, which is untapped. And I haven't seen what you can say. I haven't seen, like, I guess an upgrade in the sense of using the actual culture as a source of storytelling since the original stories. Even with Rick Remender's his short-lived story, even though that was a lot,
which was clearly intended to set up an ongoing. I'll always maintain that.
It was set up, and then there's little hints of the actual tradition that I felt would have been cool to see, but we did not get there yet. And I feel there's so much things that we can do with that character. John Constantine, I'm a fan of. I think that would be a lot of fun to write. I'm a huge Two-Face fan. I would write it. I would find a way to make a Two-Face book work.
I'd buy the hell out of that.
Yeah, those are. A lot of people have been saying they want to see me write Black Panther. I'm afraid of if that ever happens. Because
you don't want to follow Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Let's not start. I got to be cordial and positive, right?
I got you.
But no, it's more so. Black Panther has such a rabid fan base that I'm also a part of, and so we're very critical. And I was just like, oh, I don't know if I want to take that, even though I have ideas that would be fun to play with. But who knows? We'll see what happens.
If nothing else, you could get him out of outer space. So, hey, for what it's worth.
If I can, I'd like to take things in the other direction, because to me, I feel like you're on the forefront of what the future of comics actually can be and what we're looking at in indie books and Kickstarter books and the accessibility behind this, what Cody just called mainstream now, I feel like is being blurred more and more now, because, you know, what we're finding is a lot of the biggest books aren't coming from the big two. And I feel like the shift that we're seeing comes from creators like yourself who are pushing the boundaries of what comics are, but they're not always easy to find. And that's kind of the trick, is people are like, well, I know I can go get X-Men and Spidey and whatever at the comic shop, but, you know, where can I get Isnana? Is there anything you can tell, especially like our viewers or anybody out there who's looking to get more into the indie scene, and how to find that accessibility for titles that have representation, that are telling stories that we need to have?
Well, that all in mind, they're much easier to find than they have been the past couple of years. There have been many websites, journalists, bloggers who do their best to go to conventions to find a lot of these books that they're looking for, as well as making articles and listings of, these are some great books out there that you guys should check out. So I understand that it can be a little difficult, especially against the tides of Marvel and DC, but it's all a simple Google. Like, what are some Black comic books or Black independent comic books, or Black creator-owned comics? You can just type those in. There's a cesspool of just resources that you can find. Some that has Isnana on there as well. Even CBR, they did one when I was shocked to see Isnana on there. It was just like, oh, cool, this is awesome. You know, sci-fi.com, they even did a showcase on Isnana, which, you know, surprised me. It was just like, holy crap, this is awesome. You know, and it's really about making the step to do the research. And just like how somebody can just go into a comic shop and just say, hey, can you recommend something? You can do that online as well. A lot of these books, they have their own websites. You can find them through Amazon as well. There's so many different venues you can do, especially now that you can't even go to cons anymore to find these books. But they're out there. The resources out there. People just gotta, I don't know. They need to get off their asses or sit down on their asses and open up Google and just start typing.
I love that. Do you see yourself as someone who's kind of on the forefront of this changing tide in comics, in what you're creating and how you're putting it out there through Kickstarter and anything like that?
I see that people look at me that way, but I don't know if I don't let it. I don't know. It's not something.
You are like,
own it, man.
I
don't want to push it.
As much as I like to be very sarcastic and cocky, I really don't look at myself. I guess that particular way that some people do. I'm still, even every email review, anything that I see that praises my work, I'm still just like, oh, that is so cool. I'm always very humbled by it. There are times though where once in a while, I'd say if some of my work gets passed on, I'm just like, do you not know what Isnana is? You know, like the importance of, and I do once in a while get to that sort of mentality, but I'm still very humble in a sense, and to the point even when I see any of my peers getting some amazing gigs and opportunities, to me, I'm always just excited to see them get there and thinking to myself like, yo, we are making it, you know, and my time will come. That's how I see it. You know, whenever it comes, it'll come. I see there's work being done. I see there's people finding my work, doing things to really showcase and push their support for it. And I just feel like whenever that time is ready to reach me, it will be there. I'm not in a rush for it. I'm okay if it doesn't come, just as long as I hope that I am helping with changing the narrative of what can be done, what is out there.
Well, and
No, while we're on the subject, like if you're watching this and you're saying, well, shit, man, I got an indie book that I want to get word out about, send that to us, editor@comic-watch.com. Send us your press releases. Send us your Kickstarters. Send us your shit. We will put it out there because
Oh, absolutely.
we want that stuff to go out into the world because we want good comics.
Yeah.
That's all we want. At the end of the day, all we want is good comics. And we get a lot of bad ones. And that's fine too. But we want good comics.
We don't like to review the bad ones, but sometimes we revel in it. Every now and again. But so I mean, Greg, like what is the next step for you? I mean, just beyond kind of the boilerplate, keep doing what I'm doing, but like, if you had a chance to take Isnana to say Image, for example, or Boom, I mean, is that something you think you'd be open to, or do you want to kind of keep it more to yourself?
I don't know. I've been asked by, say, about 2 really great companies so far about picking up Isnana. One of them, I think I waited too long to say yes because I was just nervous about it. But by the time where I felt like, you know what, I should do it, they decided they wanted to go elsewhere with what they were doing with their books. And I was totally cool with that. I was just like, okay, I just see that as a sign that I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I got hit up by another company that wanted to also pick it up and distribute it. And even though I'm loving what they're doing, it's I can't do it. I I do think about the I guess the reach that a company like Image has, and but then I think about some of the stories that I hear of being in business with them as well. So I don't know what I want to do with it, but I'm also using Isnana as a way for me to learn the business. And if I do create other characters and stories for other companies, I feel like Isnana might be the one that I won't give out without maybe years of careful consideration or something. Like right now, this is the thing that I'm just holding on to.
You gotta protect your babies, so it's understandable.
Yeah,
absolutely. So, I mean, what is kind of go back to what I was saying about sharing your babies with these artists? What's your process for finding the talent that you work with? Because it's not just you and one artist. It's been a series of artists that have all brought something a little different to the project.
Well, this is like a backstory for every one of them, which is different. When I first was looking for artists for Isnana, there were a few that I had in mind. There was one. The first person I had in mind was actually a childhood friend, and we had a bit of a falling out, so that didn't happen. And I reached out to one particular Black artist whose work I'm a huge fan of, but it just didn't seem scheduling wise it was going to work, and so I decided, screw it. I'm gonna go to these websites and put out an ad. And so I went through penciljack.com, digital webbing, DeviantArt. I went to a couple, and then Walter responded to my Penciljack ad. And then from there, of seeing his work and us vibing, and I always try to see if I can have a rapport with my creative team.
Yeah, certainly.
And shoot the shits and have fun and be professional. Let's go, let's do it. And after Isnana, I think that opened up to a lot of creators wanting to work with me in something.
Mm-hmm.
And when I worked with myself, a gentleman, I think that's when David Brame reached out to me, because I think he did a variant cover, and he was like, "Hey, I love your work. If there's anything you want to do one day?" And that's what started our relationship. And Daryl Toe for Volume 2, I was actually a fan of one of his web series, and I had no idea that he even knew anything about Isnana. And so one day he just randomly hit me up with a pinup, and I was just like, dude, I'm freaking out because I love the fuck out of your book, dude. It's just like, this is so freaking cool. and we started working on something together, but we had to scrap it. And I just, given that it was scrapped, but I loved working with him, and Walter couldn't do volume 2, I just asked him, hey, do you want to do volume 2? And so it's like everyone has a different type of backstory, but right now it's really about networking and keeping your eyes open to who's out there, and trying to be as cool as possible, because you attract a lot of the people from not only from your work, but also your personality. And I think a lot of people just love shooting the shits with me. So that makes it easy to find a creative team of people that you want to work with. So I haven't been having much issues finding people as much as I hear stories of people struggling, but it's been coming pretty easy for me.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So what's your next project going to look like?
So currently I am working on a book called Stronghold for 133 Art from Jason Reeves. And this is another work for hire. He created this character who he wanted me to flesh out. And he is a biracial black man who has albinism from the South, who's also gay. And so a lot of struggles there, which is a reality for a lot of people. Once again, a showcase of marginalized people. I've even met a black queer man with albinism while I was writing the book, and I'm just like, yo, you look just like the damn character. And I didn't want to freak him out or say anything, but but it was just like, people like this exist, and we don't see that being showcased. And when you do see someone with albinism or a black person with albinism in the media, they're usually villains. And I think it was really cool that Jason, reached out to me and say, yo, I have this character. I think you can flesh it out if you'd be interested. So we are currently running a Kickstarter now. We have 5 or 4 days left on it. We reached a goal, but, we're always down to get more backers, people who hopefully have more eyes and new readers as well. We're almost halfway through the production of the second issue. So definitely check that out. It's called Nation Stronghold. It's about, once again, that particular character who's a superhero who gets a mission of having to go back home to New Orleans, where he has really fucked up history, and having to deal with like the demons of his past, and the fact of seeing his struggles of accepting the fact that he's black and he's gay and this other stuff. So, and mixing with a lot of superheroics at the same time. Also I'm working on a series with TJ Sterling and Bruno. I don't want to fuck up his last name. Olivier.
Aha! I'm not the only one.
But that's that. I don't know if we've announced the title yet, but it's supposed to be like a crazy, trippy, what the fuck were they smoking type of book.
So this is your Sienkiewicz book.
Oh my god, I love it, man. That's one of my idols, my inspirations. But yeah, I'm involved with a lot of projects that I'm doing right now. I don't know what else I can say. One called Altered Noir that I'm doing with Quinn McGowan, which it's been done, but we just haven't released it yet. And that's been on me. That's every time I'm just like, dude, I'm sorry, I'm working on this, I'm working on that. But it's gonna come out. It's gonna come out.
Awesome. Cody, do you have anything else you'd like to throw out there?
No, I mean, I just really want to thank Greg for coming on and hanging out with us. Like, really cool. It's way long overdue. I've been pushing this Nana on Comic Watch since I think like the 5th episode of Comic Watchers, where I was pushing volume 1. So I'm really happy to have you here finally. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. This was fun.
Nick.
I mean, I guess I just have to echo it. Huge fan of horror. I finally listened to Cody because he's always filling our chat. Like, you got to check this out. I so glad I did. Thank you so much for doing
Thank you for reading.
And I'll just pile on with the thank yous a little bit, but I'll also throw out there that just talking with you and learning, just a little bit of your journey and reading your work. My own daughter, my older daughter, is mixed race and is recently identified as bisexual, and I just absolutely love that there's creators like you out there that she could turn to and hopefully identify with. And I just honestly and genuinely mean it when I say thank you for doing what you're doing.
Man, thank you for those kind words. That means a lot.
Yeah. Hey, you're doing it right, man. Don't stop.
I don't plan to anytime soon.
Good. Awesome. You heard it here first. Greg is not going anywhere. Well, that's our show for the week. Thank you so much for listening. Comic Watcher Show is part of the comic-watch.com family. You can check us out anywhere finer podcasts are found. Also check out our sister shows, Mutant Watch, Valiant Watch, Wrestling Watch, and we've got a brand spanking new one just started. First episode is just coming out, called Image Watch. So be on the lookout for all of those. Support your local comic store, support indie creators, read, and be kind to each other. Thank you so much.